Everyone, welcome back again to Spiritual Growth Tarot and Astrology. This is going to be a different reading for my astrology family. I wanted to go through the total solar eclipse. I'll do a different video for the partial lunar eclipse that'll be coming up in May, but this one's coming up April 19th in the USA, and I'm just going to stay in my own lane here and let my Aussie friends, Aussie astrologers, and in other countries, those astrologers do their country. I'm just going to stay here in the USA. But I'm going to take you through, you'll have to know your chart, you'll have to know, your house cusps and all of that, but I'm going to take you through all the different possibilities of what it could be for you with the total solar eclipse coming in on April 19th. So, without further ado, let me swap out cameras here and bring you over my table where you can have some visuals to reference rather than just looking at my mug. Doesn't help you learn. Okay, be right back. Okay, so just a few notes before I get started. It's important to know that it's happening at this time, Pacific time, which is 9:13 p.m., so that means, and that's on April 19th, of course, so that means that we won't be able to see it, in Pacific time because it'll be dark, right? But if you're in Australia, it happens on April 20th, and it's about, it starts here about 8 p.m., so we'll be feeling it in Pacific time. But if you're in Australia, you're going to have to look and see where you are in Australia as far as the exact time. But it will be visible in pretty much only in Australia and eastern Indonesia. And I found a great article that I'll link in the description area so that you can, get a visual, because there's nothing better than looking at it move across the landmass. So, but the important thing to remember is that total solar eclipses, this one is actually called a hybrid eclipse as well, a hybrid solar eclipse. And I guess that's because it's a combination of the total and the annular eclipses. But again, like I said, where you are on the planet is going to make a difference as to whether or not you can see it. But here in the chart, and so, okay, hold on, some other important notes. So here it is. It's this whole conglomeration right here that is really, really important. And, but just to keep in mind that when it comes to solar eclipses, it's more of an external event to where things are happening around you, might not necessarily affect you, especially not usually. Well, it can affect you emotionally if it interferes with your work and your home life. I've had that happen before. But when it comes to the lunar eclipses, those will be, and that'll be coming up in May. I'll do a different reading on that. But that will be more of an internal, things that you're feeling, and you make those changes from within, and then it does affect the outer. So what I really want to focus in the most is, I'm going to talk about it, but then I'm going to take you through the different houses. So you're going to need to know, you're definitely going to need to know your chart. And there are so many websites to get free, birth charts. You have to have your exact time of birth, or pretty close, within minutes, and have your chart out. And then what you're going to do is look for wherever 29 degrees, or pretty much 0 degree Taurus, is in your chart. But I'm going to focus here on the 29 degrees because it's an anaretic degree, which means it brings in the anaretic action of any sign, right? Because all the degrees go from 0 to 29. We don't go from 1 to 30 with the astrological degrees. So another 10 minutes and we'll be in Taurus territory. But the anaretic degree of any sign brings in more intensity and more strength and more power. So because Mars rules Aries, this is a very Martian type of a transit for all of us. And Mars, we just have to remember, moves energy. It gets us going. It puts us in a direction that we're willing to fight for. It activates things in our lives. So wherever this 29 degrees is landing in your chart, that will be the area of your life that you're going to be activating something, that you're going to be moving towards something that you really want, and you'll just keep working it and working it and working it. It can be like a force of nature, and when it comes to those nth degrees of Aries, it's very, very, very independent. It's very courageous, and we're willing to, blaze our own trail and move forward in ways that we never have before. So there could be some external events that get us going, and depending on which houses, that'll be the area of your life that gets going the most. So I'll address that in a minute, but I have to speak to the aspects here, because we have an exact, now that's the other thing too. If this is bumping up against any of your planets in your natal chart, the other important factors is to know that we only use, I tend to just look at the conjunctions and the oppositions. Only if a square involves something that's just, 1 degree or so. And that we definitely have going on with Pluto to this aspect, right? Or Pluto aspecting this eclipse. It doesn't as much, Pluto's squaring the node, so it's bringing in the energy, but that's just an extra. So notice here we've got the 4, and so we're talking about a 5-degree orb between the nodes here, and this is lasting. This Pluto squaring the nodes is lasting until December 7th, I think. 4th or 7th? Yeah, December 7th. So that brings in the element. What does this translate to? Basically, issues with power and experiences from the past that you don't want to have anymore, and you're willing to work hard at it to move on in your own independent nature. And that brings in the exact, see right here, these 2 squares up to Pluto, the sun and the moon joined together. This is the eclipse right here. And Eris is involved by 5, all these other planets are involved. There's some extra oomph coming up behind it. But when it comes to your own personal chart, of course, all of these transits are happening in your chart. If you overlay, if you get out your chart, you can overlay, you can literally draw in all the planets in the different houses of your chart. But when it comes to directly aspecting planets, like I said, I tend to only look at, the oppositions and the conjunctions, so where it's joined with. So if you have any planets or hot points, let's say it's your ascendant or your IC or your descendant or your midheaven, then those are really, that would be really important to know. As is, if you have a house cusp, then it's going to involve 2 different houses, and you're going to have to look at both houses and know that those would be the areas of your life that would be affected the most. So it's something that we feel intensely for a few weeks, and then it kind of dies down, but it's still operational. What the eclipses tend to do is cause us to make changes that do affect the rest of, we could say the rest of our lives, because when we make decisions, it puts us in a different trajectory. So with this, Yeah, I'd say actually you need to look and see where Pluto is transiting through your houses. Just look at all of these different aspects, right? Rather than me going into all of these and speaking about that, because it'll take quite some time, and I cover that immensely in the weekly videos. So you can always go back there and look. And yeah, so just to look at how that lines up in your natal chart. So let me just focus in now on the eclipse through all the different houses. So if this eclipse is happening in your first house, it's also going to involve your seventh house. So that brings in the polarity. You know, we're going to speak to the different houses now. So your sense of self, the first house, your sense of self, your most personal issues, your individuality, your health even, and mostly it's a house of new beginnings, because it's you on your path and, making some big changes usually, especially when we're dealing with that 29th, that anaretic degree. And it will affect your relationships. Now I'm going to speak to your seventh house. So that would be your relationships and all of your interactions with society and other people, your close people, any dealings with the public. And then, of course, also marriage or divorce. Sadly, that happens. It's our house of partnership, right? It's our house of love. And it rules all different things as far as contracts, agreements that you make. It could even have to do with like lawsuits. It could even have to do with people who are like coming at you from the outside. Often we'll say that the 12th house can be hidden enemies, where the 7th house can be open enemies. And while I don't like to, even use the word enemies, there are people that just don't operate nicely. They don't play nice. So with this polarity, the thing to go towards is your independence. And no matter which house it's going through, this will be general. We want to go towards our independence and being very self-aware of what we want. We want to trust our instincts. We're going to need to align with the courage of our hearts. We're going to need to be thinking about what could be constructive and thinking long-term. And then we're also going to have to be working with moderation, themes of moderation. Because sometimes when things are coming at you from a relationship area, you can forget about what's important with yourself if you're not careful, right, with those themes. And what we're wanting to let go of with this eclipse is being too overgiving, too nice, too appeasing, too, some of the themes with seventh house relationships, because it's ruled by Libra. We can be just, what is that, peace at any price, type of a thing, like, oh, you don't rock the boat. So we're dealing with confrontation issues. We can have loving confrontations, where you sit down and say, hey, this is really important to me, whatever this is, But you're not going to back down and let it go. You're going to name your space. You're going to have your healthy boundaries, because we're talking Mars and it's moving energy, and we're going to go towards what we want. And if your relationships, if those people love you and care about you, they're going to support you. They're going to be saying, yeah, how can I help? And then that you have those relationships that last for quite some time. But if you have any attachment to everything needing to be status quo, you're going to run into trouble, right? Now, on another level, it's a great, no matter which houses, this is a great, and I find this not ironic, but just I love the way astrology works. We're going to really want to see fairness and, most of all, justice. Because we've got that anaretic degree of Aries, bumping up against the polar opposite, which would be, even though you can't see it here, but I'm always looking at those, the polar opposite would be the anaretic degree of Libra. So that's something for all of us to hold, no matter what house it's affecting in our lives, no matter what houses it's affecting. So now I'll move to the second house. So if this eclipse is happening in your second house, it's also going to affect your 8th house, and vice versa. It could be that you have 29 degrees Aries in the opposite house that I'm speaking to first, and it will still be the same energy, the same issues. So don't worry. I'm just going to go through the 1st to the 7th, but I'm also speaking to the polar opposite. Okay, so if it's in your second house, we're dealing there with your values, what you really care about, your material possessions, so your money, like your actual liquid money, your belongings, things that, your possessions that you could move around and be, fluid with. So basically, your personal income and expenses, right? It's your house of personal finance. But it's also your house of, because it's ruled by Venus, it's also the house that has to do with what you really care about, and you're going to make value comparisons. You're going to be looking at your relationships with, do they bring in pleasure? Do they support me in my self-worth? Do they support my values? Are we, like-minded, kindred spirits? And or can we get along even though we're not interested in the same things, right? And it's a very feminine sign as well, or very feminine house. And then when it comes to moving through, with that polarity up against the 8th house, and the 8th is, so the issues would be everything that you value and you own, and then bumping up against your partner's resources and your joint financial holdings, and even if you're married, it could be your partnership or your marriage partner, what they earn, right, and how they manage their money, because that can affect you, right? It's also our house of business partners, and it's also our house of taxes. It's a house of recycling and, getting rid of things that don't work out or we don't need anymore. It's a house of regeneration. So things move, and it's our house of reincarnation. It's our house of death, rebirth, death benefits, legacies, things that we inherit. It's even a house of insurance. So we might be going through, we might be finding new insurance companies or taking on new insurance policies, things like that. Okay, so let's go to the 3rd house. So if this eclipse is happening in your 3rd house, then we're in that area of learning. We're in that area of making decisions, and we're also trying to focus in and get rid of distractions. It has to do with the way we express the new things we're learning. It has to do with our siblings sometimes and our immediate community. And sometimes it can be an area where, especially to have, that nth degree of energy, of Aries energy there, it's like putting Mars in the third house. So there can be this intense focus on learning, and you don't mind debating about it because you're working things out, with the mind. And other people can help you, even if they're coming at you and they don't agree, they might make you think, right? And you get different perspectives when we have an eclipse in the third house. And that's especially important when it comes to your siblings and relatives and your neighbors and your neighborhood environment, things like that. You may be learning from them. And then, with the polar opposite being the ninth house, what we learn can change the things that we believe in and the meanings in our lives. What brings meaning into our life, I should say, into our lives. The ninth house is also divination, so there could be a lot of intense focus on learning new forms of divination, which is really fun. And also the ninth house has to do with publishing. You might be working on publishing something. It's all forms of publishing. There is no limitation. All forms of media. You could have an urge to get a master's or a PhD or anything to extend your higher education. It's thinking long term when we get to the ninth house, the third to the ninth, we're learning and thinking long term. It's also the house of foreign lands. It's also legal affairs. It does work a little well with the eighth, It's courts of law with the ninth house sometimes. If you're studying to be an attorney, that would be the focus there. I could easily see that. Or, like I said, studying any type of divination. And when it comes to the other things, it could just be, like those, you're traveling, but it's a long, like you're going somewhere a long ways away. And it's also the house of universities. It's a house of religion, churches, things like that. It's the house that represents our besides philosophy, the way we think, It's also our house of our marriage. If you're married or you're in partnership, then it would be your house of your in-laws. And they do have influence usually over your partner, so it's important to remember that. Let's see, is there anything else with the ninth house that I can remember? Most of all, I just feel so much, about the belief system. Just remember that Jupiter rules this house, and Mercury rules the third house. Jupiter the ninth, Mercury the third. So, just like, Taurus ruled by Venus in the second, and Pluto, Scorpio in the eighth. So let's move to the fourth. So the fourth house to the 10th. So the fourth house is the house of home, house of our roots, house of our emotional foundation, our safety, security, our psychological sensitivities. It's a house of our real needs. It's our home, our family life, everything that has to do with our family. And then also, how the second house is our money that's fluid and moves. The fourth house is more those tangible, those assets that, like if you're going to sell your house, it takes some time. So it's more fixed, right? Houses, real estate, property, all of that. And it's also the house that rules our mother and all of our relationships that are kind of maternal. Like those that you nurture, those that you love, the things that you really care about. It's also the house of working from home, and it's also the house of our early childhood environment, and there might be healing that happens there. It's also like the later years of life, so this could have to do with relatives, older relatives, the elderly that you may be helping. And then on the polarity with that, and the polar opposite, or bringing those two areas of life together, then this is the 10th house of career, the 10th house of our purpose in life and what we're putting out there, how we interact with life, how we, especially if it were to be up here in the midheaven, if you have 29 degrees Aries up here in the midheaven, you would be really participating in a brand new way, bringing in a whole new career, or furthering your career in a whole new way with a lot more strength and integrity and authority than you've ever had. And you may be very well working from home. You may very well be thinking more worldly, thinking more long-term. It's like you put Saturn and Capricorn in this house, the natural rulers of the 10th house, and you're thinking, okay, what about the next 30 years, basically? What do I want to do? What do I want to solidify? What is it that I want to control in my life, right? What am I trying to master in my life? And so the 4th can really control the 10th, because if you're having trouble at home, it's going to affect your career, and vice versa. If you're having career issues, it's going to affect your home life, because you're not going to feel so secure. So this would be an area you'd be working both areas. Let's see, what else with the 10th? It's a lot of significance when it comes to either your integrity or lack of, right? It's often the house that rules the father and any other so-called authority figure in your life, but maybe you're old enough that there's no more of that going on, right? But maybe you're responsible for other people that are much younger than you, and then that very, very well will affect us. It has to do with government institutions. It has to do with our employers, or employees if you are an employer. 7th house would be more your co-workers, but 10th house would be either your boss, maybe your supervisor, or supervisors. Sometimes there's more than one. Often there is, or often there are. It has to do with just basically your public life and the things that you can achieve and the things that you have been achieving. So this might be another go around for you, and this time you're much more solid, right? Because, the eclipses keep moving, right? Okay, so then let's go to the 5th house. Now the 5th house is cool. This is our house of our creative self-expression. It's ruled by the Sun and Leo. It's our house of having fun, usually, because it's a house of pleasure. It has to do with what we want. It has to do with our children and grandchildren sometimes too. And it's our house of entertainment, love affairs, romance, most of all creative self-expression, though I just can't say that enough. And it changes, as our creativity changes. It's our house that's also associated with any educational institution. And, along with the 3rd, it has, quite a bit of influence on our education. So, so most of all, just think of what's fun. And then merge that with the 11th house, which has to do with the goals, your hopes, wishes, desires. In the tarot, it's like, imagine putting the star card here, right? You could put the sun card here and the star here. You've got it all going on. Right? So there's a lot of energy. When it comes to the 11th house, this is also our friends and all of the groups that we decide to join in. And it's also the house of the internet, Uranus rules this house, the 11th house, whereas the sun rules this house. Let's see, what else with the 11th house? Yeah, just any, like kindred spirits is what I keep hearing. And then how we interact with our kindred spirits and how we can all create win-win situations. Yeah. Okay, so then lastly, the last two houses to go through are the 6th house. It's our house of health. It's our house of work and service and daily structured reality. It has everything to do with our diet and our hygiene and our health care. It's generally what is working or not, and especially to have the eclipse at 29 degrees, it's basically put Mars here in a house that is ruled by Mercury, and there can be a lot of intense passion for getting really healthy, or as healthy as you possibly can, right? And then merging that with the 12th house, that brings in the ability to come full circle. Like maybe now you know what works for you health-wise and work-wise and schedule-wise, and now there's some completion coming in to where you're going to be much more sensitive with yourself. You're not going to like being held back or, boundaries that aren't fair. The 12th house is our house of psychic sensitivities and our source. It's basically think in terms of the soul's journey all the way around the chart, and then when you get to the 12th house, you're blending everything that you know and have, and your wisdom and even your wise unconscious, and you're just there, very full. So this can be, the way I like to look at this is like the human, 6th house human, and the 12th house divine. And what is that like to live? I mean, we all know we're all human, but what's it like to bring more of the divine into your daily life? So we're talking time for meditation, time for self-contemplation, time for just thinking about, like imagine you're 60 and you're thinking, well, I might only live to be 90. How do I want this last 30 years of my life to go? Or you might be 80 and you're thinking, maybe I'll live to be well over 100. How do I want to live these last, 20, 25, 30 years, right? There are all of these questions. And you really get in touch with what matters to you most, especially, it could be the same thing with this, 2nd to the 8th house polarity, but the 6th to the 12th, if you're not feeling good health-wise, you're going to want to feel better. And the only way to feel better is to figure out a diet that works for you, or movement, exercise that works for you. And the most important thing I can ever say to anyone is that aside from needing healthy food and movement in our lives, there are no one-size-fits-all programs or routines. I mean, myself personally, I use the blood type diet because it works for me. But I would never impose on anyone else, well, you got to do this or you should be doing that. Because we all go through different things in our lives. And we literally can go through a rebirth in our bodies so that we're bringing through the wisdom of the next lifetime in this lifetime, and there's no need to we put ourselves in a situation where we're, oh my goodness, I mean, literally, I would have had back or neck surgery if I didn't know that I was going through a rebirth, So if I do it, if I've done it, that possibility is there for everyone else. So listen to your intuition. That's what the 12th house is all about. Any of the water houses, the 4th, 8th, and the 12th, are going to be highly intuitive. But I believe that we are all so much more sensitive than we've ever been. And we need healthy, strong boundaries around that. That's our lesson with Saturn in Pisces now. We're learning healthier boundaries because it's good to be sensitive and it's good to be vulnerable, but not to the wrong people, right? So we don't want to just give away you don't want to put yourself in a position where you could be vulnerable with someone who isn't trustworthy. So that's really important to remember. Let's see. Anything else I want to say about the 12th house? Well, on a purely physical level, it's our house of charitable organizations, any type of hospital or clinical setting, rest homes, things like that. It's also the house of prisons and detention centers, things like that. It's also our house of rehab, but the 8th could be too, because that's more of an addiction, thing there. I forgot to talk about that with the 8th house. It can be the house where we're overcoming an addiction because we really, really want that. And 12th house can be that too. 6 to 12th, absolutely. Absolutely. Let's see. So maybe, we're giving up, like some of my friends are giving up sugar. Anything that isn't working out for you on the physical level or on a routine level, there's going to be a letting go. With the 12th house, I see it as so much as that source energy that helps you to just let go because the other isn't so important to you anymore. Like there's some new focus in your life, and there's, not the need to, or the substitute needs when it comes to giving up bad habits. Those are just substitute needs that are masking the real need. So when we get in touch with the real needs that we all have, which are connection and pleasure and creative self-expression, then there you go. You've got that. So if you're being creative, and I have no judge over creativity. I mean, I honestly just don't. So whatever way you're creating in your own life, I mean, cleaning out closets can be so creative, right? Anything that frees up the energy to move forward in a new way is wonderful. And it's going to be much easier for you as we go through all these, changes. But the changes are good. And I love that this eclipse is ushering in a big, bold, new change. I absolutely love it. So lots of courage. Hold on to your courage. Let go of the need to be first. Let go of the fear of abandonment. Go, on your own path. Assert yourself in the most positive ways and do the best that you can to create win-win situations. So maybe there's more collaboration coming through for a lot of you, and that's a really good thing because we're all interdependent on each other, right? So I think that's it. And yeah, I'm just going to get this uploaded for you. If you have any questions, feel free to drop it in the comments. And of course, for my members at the astrology level, this will be, uploaded without any ads. And anyway, meanwhile, big hugs. Take good care, as always. Bye.